Well, let's spend a little time now on the campaign in Saskatchewan. There are 14 seats in Saskatchewan. 10 of them were held by the Conservatives when the election was called. 2 were held by the NDP, 1 independent, and 1 Liberal, Cabinet Minister Ralph Goodale. This time, the polls suggest the Conservatives could be headed for a clean sweep in the province. Morgan Campbell has been following the campaign on the ground for CPAC. She's with me now. Morgan, good to see you. Thanks for being here. What is the overall mood in the province as we come down to the last couple of weeks of the campaign?
People seem to be a little bit, I'd say, frustrated already with the campaign. It's a shorter campaign than it could have been, but I think maybe the general consensus among a lot of voters here in Saskatchewan is it's not short enough. I think people are frustrated, generally speaking, with the lack of substance in terms of the issues we've heard discussed. Seems to be a lot of mudslinging and not necessarily a lot of clear policy discussions.
What are people saying about these questions now about, he's a Saskatchewan guy, Ottawa to Saskatchewan, about Andrew Scheer and his past, the insurance broker story, the university degree and where he got it, and now this dual citizenship controversy. What role is any of that playing?
I think generally speaking among Andrew Scheer's supporters or his base, which as you mentioned in the intro, there are quite a few Andrew Scheer supporters, quite a few people who are excited to see a leader who has a seat out west again. I think that they are relatively unfazed by these recent developments. I don't think a lot of people are concerned about. I mean, it's quite common for people to have dual citizenship in a lot of different places, and the intricacies of if you were a full-blown insurance broker or someone who worked in an insurance office in the general scheme of things, especially compared to some other scandals we've seen, here in Canada and other parts of the world south of the border, it seems relatively tame. So I don't see that really having an impact on people who were considering voting Conservative. I don't think it would change their vote.
I know every riding has some of its own particular ballot box issues, but is there an overarching vote driver in the province of Saskatchewan that you can tell so far?
We did have the Fridays for the Future climate rally here in Regina, where I am based, last week, and we saw quite a few people out in support of that. Of course, the provincial government here is one of the first governments to challenge the constitutionality of the federally imposed carbon tax that took place a few months ago. And although we haven't seen a lot of real-time financial implications from that yet, it really is a lightning rod for divisive politics. The carbon tax is something that is brought up by both Conservative, NDP, Green, Liberal candidates across the board, and it's an issue where voters are certainly divided. You have people who are pro-carbon tax and you have people who are anti-carbon tax, and that seems to be something that comes up quite frequently as we come to the election coming up right away.
Let's talk about Regina, Wascana. Every election we hear Ralph Goodale. Well, Ralph Goodale could be in trouble, could lose his seat, but he just keeps getting reelected. So what are you hearing this time around?
Every time people think, maybe this is the election that Ralph's not going to make it. In 2015, he ran against a Conservative candidate, Michael Cram, who actually is his Conservative opponent in 2019 as well. And people think he can't possibly maintain this support election after election, but he always does. I was out covering some Regina Louvain riding events last week, and even though they weren't related to Ralph Goodale's riding at all, he was still there. He was working the crowd. He was shaking everyone's hand. I went to the climate rally. He was there, shaking everyone's hand. He is just tireless in his campaigning. He's at every barbecue. He's at every ribbon cutting ceremony. So I think that regardless of which political field you may count yourself to be a part of, Ralph Goodale it's fairly consistent that he's just a really strong politician. Now, mind you, the Liberals haven't had as high of a profile in Saskatchewan or anywhere since maybe the 90s, so he might be a victim this time around of having too much of a spotlight on him, considering he's been a pretty high-profile cabinet minister in Justin Trudeau's government, and Justin Trudeau's government is not very popular here in Saskatchewan. So people are saying, if there was a time when Ralph's luck may be wearing out, that 2019 just might be that time.
All right, Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader, hit Saskatchewan today trying to shore up support in those 3 seats the NDP won in the last election. How are his proposals, in particular for the energy industry, going over in Saskatchewan?
There was a story that broke here last week that there were some members of the United Steelworkers Union. There's a steelworkers union that's quite active at the Everest steel plant here in Regina. They have about 1,100 members who were thinking, well, maybe we can't vote NDP anymore because they don't seem to be a party that's in line with the pipelines, because a lot of steelworkers are involved in the oil and gas sector, in the pipeline industry, and the energy industry. And as Jagmeet Singh sort of distances himself and his party from that base, he is losing a lot of support here in Saskatchewan. Now, mind you, there aren't great alternatives. Some of the people I was speaking with who are involved in different labor unions say, well, we're not happy with the NDP, but we're also not happy with the Conservatives because traditionally they haven't been a friend of the union sector. So that leaves them sort of feeling like there isn't really a party that aligns with their values, and a little bit torn, at least at this stage in the campaign.
All right, and we're going to hear more from Morgan in the next few minutes here because she's reporting on two ridings, very interesting ridings in Saskatchewan. Thanks for this, Morgan. We'll talk again.
My pleasure.